Okay, good evening, friends and family, and thank you for coming to another night with Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities and our weekly podcast, Behind Black Business. And we have a guest here tonight, Rosita Chatonda. Rosita is not a stranger to our organization and our podcast. She's been a guest on here before. Rosita Chatonda has done a lot of work in the area of education here in the Chicago area, and especially as it relates to the Chicago public schools. So, because of all of what's going on in Chicago and many of the other cities, I think it's important that we give Rosita a voice. So, I want to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Um, as you know, we are a nonprofit organization, and here at Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities, and we've come together because we feel that there is a need to do some work to sustain our communities, our Black communities here in Chicago, which is right in line with what Rosita is doing, and many other people are working really hard, and because we've been under so many assaults, so many attacks. It's just a constant, and it's continuing today. And so we felt that one of the best ways that we could support our communities was by supporting our Black-owned businesses. And inherently, our Black-owned businesses would be able to help circulate the dollars in our communities by hiring Black people, by supporting Black causes, by serving as mentors, giving other businesses opportunities. Because unfortunately, when other people come into our communities, that does not happen. And so we have been drained, of so much of our resources, on top of what the government doesn't do and what local municipalities do not do for our communities. So that's why we started this organization. And every week we feature a Black-owned business on this podcast. So we want people to become aware of the businesses and get to know the people who are behind these businesses, these organizations, the authors that we've had on this show. And so this is why we do this. And we also are great proponents of our Black bookstores. We do have a number of Black bookstores in the Chicago area. We ask that you support them. Go to our website at rrgbc.org. We have listed the Black bookstores here in Chicago. We know you like to put everything on Amazon, but hey, we have got to get busy and start doing what we need to do. This is what other ethnic groups are doing. They are supporting each other. And so we ask that you support our Black bookstores. To help support our Black bookstores, we do a book giveaway every month. We feature a Black bookstore, they select the book, we purchase the book, and we send the book free of charge to one of our subscribers. So this past month was Sebastian's Dreams, which is located here in South Shore. And the two books were My Pops is Tops, KDK Plays Lady for a Day. And this book these books were written for an individual with autism. Their parent felt that it was important that she start writing books and start developing programs for her son who lives here in Chicago in the South Shore area. And she's working on creating a community for him. And so these two books will go to Rochelle Lilly. Rochelle, you are the winner of these two books, and we will be contacting you, and you will receive those books directly from Sebastian's Dreams, which is one of our bookstores. And then our bookstore for this month, we do a cycle, is Underground Bookstore. Brother Yoel is the owner of the Underground Bookstore, and Yoel has chosen The White Wall and How Big Finance Bankrupts Black America by Emily Flitter. So all you have to do is go to rrgbc.org and subscribe, and you could become the winner of this book for the month of October. All right. And then we want you to support the Southside Community Federal Credit Union, who has been in our community for over 20 years, providing loans and financial literacy and other services to the community. They're located at 57th and Wentworth in the shopping mall there, right there at 55th and Garfield. Uh, Open up an account. That's how banks make money. That's how they create money, by opening up an accounts. And we put our money in banks that do not give us the service that they should be giving us. So support the Southside Community Federal Credit Union. And then we have our public policy still on the table, where we want our local schools, our local libraries to give contracts to our Black bookstores. So go to Save Black Bookstores Chicago at change.org and sign our petition. And so this kind of leads me into our discussion, Rosita. We know so often um, there's monies on the table, and it's not, we complain about the money that is being spent on the table, whether it's for our schools, whatever other kind of or issues that we have going on. But then we got to look at who that money is going to. See, that's America, and it's capitalism. And so that's something that we're going to want to talk about a little bit later in the show. But you have started an organization. You have been fighting for our Black teachers in the Chicago Public Schools. You have worked in the Chicago Public Schools. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to have a voice tonight. I know you call in on a lot of the other shows and you get to talk a little bit about this and a little bit about that.
Yeah, not much.
I want to give you a voice tonight. And so
Uh,
you let the audience know who you are, and let's start talking about what you're doing as regards to our Chicago public schools.
well, thank you very much for giving me a platform. I wanted to say that my name is Rosita Chatonda. Of course, I am started off actually in education, being a great parent, and I learned a lot. I had I was actually pregnant with my first child. He was born September the 10th, and I graduated August 30th. So I was 9 months pregnant. So after I went into college, I started having my children. And that's been a blessing. And through my three sons and my one daughter, I actually got an education, especially on how to educate Black boys, and having them right before you, and learning about their own learning styles at home. I was able to really fortunately take a lot of that to the classroom with me, because all three of my sons, I call them the three kings, and so they all have different learning styles. So whenever I would go into the schools, I would see Jonathan, Jesse, and the boys. I mean, it's in the classroom. I always grouped them according to what their learning styles were. And of course, the girls were mostly, like my daughter, smart, intelligent. So, I mean, I brought that with me. And I think it's so important for parents to come into the school system because we bring so much to knowledge and wisdom that you just can't get any other way. And so I started that way as a parent organizer. And then I was subbing, and I didn't really know when I go, like a lot of young people, when I graduated from college, I was like, well, what am I going to do with a bachelor's in psychology? I mean, it's not going to lead me right to a job. And so I wanted to take some classes in education, and then I had promised my mother I was going to graduate early, and she insisted. And after I graduated, well, of course, you don't have any more student loan money, so then I couldn't afford to go to grad school. But I stayed at home. I subbed, and then I got an offer to come into the system under Teachers for Chicago, a program that here Washington started to bring more minority teachers, specifically Black teachers, to back into the school system. So that's how I came into CPS, getting my master's in education from Concordia. And so I worked, I was a math science teacher, but at first I was a music teacher, which I loved because I was a music major when I went to Roosevelt, music composition. But, the board didn't really fund that, so I ended up being math and science. So fast forward, during the period when I was teaching, predominantly, I just wanted to teach in inner cities, communities like the one I grew up in. I grew up on the north side of Chicago in Cabrini Green, and I had a wonderful education experience. I went to the Catholic school, St. Joseph's. I started at St. Dominic's. It closed, and so after we got in eighth grade, my sister and I, we got a scholarship to go to Alvernia, which was an all-girls school up north. Predominantly very wealthy girls went there. It was a really interesting experience. It was during a period of time when integration, we were only 13 Black girls and they were 1,300 others. So you can imagine what that was like. But we did one thing we were met with a lot of racism, but we got a very good education. And that is what's key to me. I don't care what community you come out of. Um, I know that there are plenty, more than plenty, of very bright children in inner city schools. I know that because I've taught them, I've been around them, and they only need an opportunity. And when going through, I always have been solution oriented in my classroom and wanting to see, look, how can they keep saying these children don't do well on a test? What is the problem? And I just would not quit until I really did enough research and experimental things in the classroom to figure it out. And then when I got figured it out, I mean, I was on a roll. The principals would say, oh, she comes into the building and the scores start going up because I just took it upon myself. I was at the first school that closed in 2001, 2002, Williams. And I knew that there was a lot of politics, but even more so than I was even aware of back then. I knew we had a great school because I came from a great school. I got a very great education. I was always smart, and I got an opportunity through getting the foundational things I needed, even growing up in Cabrini. It didn't matter. I was able to, when I went to high school, I was in all honors classes coming from the little Cabrini Green, and I'm going to high school with these affluent children that are rich and they have all this opportunity. So I say that coming from that environment, I know that children in that environment can rise up, they can do great things, greater than anything I've done, and they can excel. And that was always the premise I had. So because we weren't getting there, I was always looking for the solution. Now I know what works for me, and I know what works for them. Fortunately, I was able to have my children in the lab school and in some private schools, and they went to public school too. So I learned a lot from that.
Well, let me
And
ask you a question. As you're talking about our Chicago public schools, and
uh,
you can compare them to the schools that you went to, um, what were the differences? I mean, I'm sure. Well, and maybe we don't even have to get into all of that because we know state of the art. All of the curriculum, even when you talk about the schools closing at that
right,
juncture, our libraries have been cut.
right,
A lot of extracurricular activities have been cut. There was all these changes and juggling going on as far as the curriculum goes. So when you say you figured it out, what is it that you figured out?
well, I was laser focused on achievement for poor Black children, those who came from similar Black backgrounds that I came from. And how can we lift them? How can we make sure that they have the scores that they need to get into great schools? I mean, I was able to pass any standardized test, so I wanted that for them. Of course, I wanted it for my own children too, and also I wanted it for the children that I taught. So I began to really focus, like really doing my own research and try trial and error. And I would give the students a test, and I would have modeled the lesson for them. And when I would give them a test, they didn't understand any the language. And I began to realize, wait a minute, now I know they understand the concept because we just went over this stuff. What is the breakdown here between the lesson that I've taught and what they comprehend? So I began to realize it was all language related. The literacy was just so much a part of the problem because our children speak a dialect of English and we don't want to acknowledge that. So when I'm giving them a standardized test, it's really written in another language. So when they take the test, they're like, what are they talking about? I began to go through every test item and explain, well, this is how we would say it. This is what it means in your
Okay.
language. And then I started seeing that the children were getting it. The score started going up. And the more I did that, the higher the score. So I realized at one point, everything was related to their own experiences. When I would do lessons for Thanksgiving, I would have them write about their families. It all began to center around my education and my need to be educated. It's all about me. I can write about me. I can read about my parents. I can understand my language. I can interpret my language. And so that's what I began to incorporate in all my classroom. In addition to that, I realized that one of the other things that was lacking in our community was money.
Mhm.
And it had brought about a lot of stress, not only for the adults, but for the children, because when many times when I would go shopping, because my daughter was in school, my sons were in school, I would literally have to buy everyone a uniform in my classroom almost because I didn't want my children to be sent back home because they didn't have uniform. So they would come in their street clothes and they would say, "Oh, you gotta go back home. You don't have on your uniform." I had uniforms for all my
And
students.
those uniforms
So
were now you talking about your students, right? In
yeah,
Chicago
my
public
students.
schools, and most of the
Because
time
I didn't sell them all.
that was a certain color shirt and a certain
Yes,
color pair of pants and gym
yes.
shoes. It was
And
pretty
because
basic.
my children basically were in school and the same ages of a lot of the kids I was thinking, so I knew what the need was. And when we would go shopping, my daughter, she'll tell you, get to Jessica, go get 15 more shirts like the one I just bought you. And then she would run around the store and we would definitely try to catch all the sales. And then I would bring those shirts to the school, the pants, whatever. And I would go bargain shopping over the summer. So whatever I found uniform like, I would get it and I would have it ready for the next year. So I didn't want the children to feel that they've got to go home. And they were clean. I wanted them to be clean and feel comfortable. And I literally just invested that out of my own pocket. And some kids had, but a lot of them in the projects, they just did not have anyone to really look out for them like that. So that was number one thing, to give them the self confidence. Well, I used to take them on a lot of field trips, and I remember how when I first took them out, the people, when they weren't really clean, the people would just make them feel so intimidated.
Hmm.
When you go to the museums, they stare at them, and I started seeing that the students started then acting up. They felt self conscious.
Mhm.
It's like become a self fulfilling prophecy. So on field trip day, the beauty shop was there, so we would be in there with our combs and our grease and our whatever we needed and the bowls. And
Mhm.
when I would take them to they acted completely different. They felt so confident and they would be taking notes and doing things. And I said, wow, they just wanted to be clean.
So, what kind of
And
support commentary did you get from your principals about this?
well, they didn't say much, and I'm just going to say this. A lot of the people in the system are boule. I call them the black boule.
Hmm.
I'm a product of Cabrini Green. I understand the struggle. They're a product from middle class Black America. They don't understand the struggle. They don't understand their attitude. Their mama should have bought them this. But when we grew up, it was a communal way. So if my mother didn't have it, your mother had it, and then I got it. That's the way I grew up. So and this is why when they tore down public housing, it was so detrimental because those were communities of people. You know what bothers me about that? What they were saying to the people is, hey, you don't have enough. I don't like the way you're living. I'll tear it down and give you nothing. you know, and then everybody scattered. And this is one reason why we have a lot of the violence we had. This was a community of people, irregardless to how poor they are, what you felt they were acting up, they still had a life. They still had a
But we
community.
also know that how that community come to be that way,
Yes,
because of the under resourcing in the community, because
right.
of the bringing drugs into the community. When I open up and we talk about all of these assaults on the
Mhm.
Black community,
Um,
even
Constantly.
the whole immigration, which we'll talk about,
Yes.
this whole immigration piece, we know historically, it's
Mm.
had a devastating adverse effect on the black community. So you
It
continue
definitely
to
will.
get all of these assaults. It's almost like you're in a war, and we come in and
You
we'll
are.
drop a bomb over here, mess up your schools. We'll drop a bomb over here. We'll bring drugs into the community. We'll drop a bomb over here. You won't get any resources for entertainment or activities for the
Exactly.
children. And
Right.
by the time they get through dropping bombs, yeah, ultimately this is what's going to happen: gentrification.
And the anger. And I tell people the biggest carjacker in the world was Mayor Daley.
Hmm.
Because and that's where the kids learned it. See, what people keep talking about the violence, but where did they learn it from? This system, and I look at what they're doing for the migrants or immigrants or illegal immigrants or job seekers or whatever you want to call them, as opposed to what they did in our community. I remember when they closed my school, they would not let the students. Now, Williams was built in the middle of the projects. Across the street, you could walk. When they closed the school, they denied access to those children who the building was built for. They had to end up going 40 and 50 blocks to school when their school was right across the street, the school that was built. So when they closed it, they would not let those children come back in there, and it became like a little uppity school. See, these are the kind of things, and so imagine this, and I tell people, imagine that they just came one day and knocked your house down and said, "Bye." tore down your school, got rid of all the people that you could depend on for support, your neighbors, your family, the relationship. And now let's go to the school and let's knock that down too. And let's tear you away from everything you know that sustains you and that supports you. Not saying that you're rich, just little things that you might need that other people in other communities wouldn't understand. When I moved from the north side to the south side, I was in culture shock because the people were so different. They were black people, but they were so different. They had attitudes like I had never seen before. And they kind of looked, you were almost afraid to tell them you came from Cabrini because they thought that was, oh my God, and like you had nine heads or something. So I had gotten to the point, well, should I really say I'm from there? But I wasn't ashamed because I know the experience. Cabrini was located near the Gold Coast. And here's my childhood experience. I used to walk to the Gold Coast every day. We trick or treated in Carl Sandburg. We walked and played on Oak Street Beach. We went to Lincoln Park. We were always in Old Town. I mean, we were surrounded. Even though Cabrini was poor, we had such a rich. I was 5 minutes away walking from the Magnificent Mile. Then I could walk downtown too. We didn't need to take a bus. Me and my friends would just go when we would go trick or treat on Halloween. We would go to all of the high rise buildings, Carl Sandburg, and all those buildings. So we had a rich, culturally rich environment, Lower North Center, all of these things that just infuse. So I wasn't ashamed of where I came from because I understood that I had gotten so much from it, from the little Catholic school I went to, from all of those things. So I had a wonderful life in Cabrini. And so when I came and here, I was kind of shocked. Oh, these people over here, they got something else going on. So when you talked about the teachers in the school, see, they came from that environment because so many of us that come out of that and we don't make it. And when we do make it into the mainstream America, then we got to deal with the black boule. We got to deal with the black Greek because see, we didn't know anything about that stuff and all those issues that just being a black person that we really shouldn't have to deal with. And not to mention when you say how did the teachers respond, I used to do things in silence because I would put like I celebrated everything. I was talking to my look, celebrate, I'm gonna celebrate everything. And I do that because our children need to celebrate. Every month I would celebrate. I would buy ice cream and cake and presents, and we would celebrate everybody's birthday. Why? Because I knew that some children that grew up in the projects had never had a birthday party. So I wanted to make sure that they had a birthday party. So I would make gift baskets, and every month, whoever had a birthday, we would celebrate with ice cream and cake and everything. And that came out of my pocket. I just wanted to have them to have that experience. So when we did that, it was kind of like some of the students would call me auntie teacher, because they said that I felt more like an auntie than a teacher because I just wanted them to have a great learning experience because I told them it's one thing I learned growing up in the projects and growing up that if I can learn to love school, and that's what I did throughout all my life, I'll go to school. If I can just find that school is the safe place, it's the haven, where I get the joy. And that's what I wanted to create in my classroom. I wanted the kids to just want to be there every day. And so we always had fun things to do, hands on. And we started at the end of what I realized was that, okay, they're really struggling financially, but I want to give them a tool. I want to give them a life tool. So if I could show them how to set up a small business and just a mock business. And I used to say, okay, I want everybody after the Iowa test and during that time is when you go on trips and at the end of the year. So we would set up our businesses. And I would have like a lemonade stand. I would have like I had jam cookies, Jessica and Melody's cookies. I had a student, Lavera, she wrote a Kwanzaa book, which you talk about. I gotta contact Lavera and beg her to publish this book. And I was on Facebook once and she tagged it and said, "You remember I won the young authors?" She won the young authors, and it's called The Night Before Kwanzaa. And it's just a beautiful book about Kwanzaa and the seven principles and mom, daddy, and his Kofi, and it's just so. When I read it, I just and she still has the book. She texted to me, and I said, "We've got to publish this book. There are not books like this." So when you talk, we did have people that wrote books. We had what we call art by us, and art by us was pictures. People, I showed them how to mat and frame their pictures, and I have a son that's an artist too, but we showed them how to mat it and frame it and sell it. So we had bookstores. So we had a. It was really like going to the
So
mall.
let me interject here. I'm listening to you talk. I'm listening to you talk about. You mentioned Boule. You mentioned basically you mentioning um, education. When we look at education, and I'm thinking about the Amish people. Okay, and I just so I can kind of give a precedence here. When I first read about the Amish people, and they have a separate society, and then you have the Mennonites who have kind of moved more into the try to have more experiences in the regular society. But within that Amish society, they would only want their children to go to school up to a certain grade because they
Mhm.
wanted to learn how to read, they want to learn how to write, and then, okay, we're going to take you and we're going to educate you what we need you to know to continue our society, to function within the
Right.
society and the culture that we have. And it seems like the education that we get so much is not educating us to come
Right.
back and do what we need to do to sustain our communities, but it's educating us to go out into the larger community
Mhm.
and become wealthy or live in certain places and have all of these experiences. And then you turn around and you look at your people who maybe haven't gotten there, and you have a certain way that you're thinking about them. And then this is
Right.
also going to affect what you do,
Mhm.
how you are going to support, how you're going to fight, what are you going to fight for? Are you going to fight to sustain communities? That's not the kind of education that we have been getting.
We haven't been. And it is so sad that so many of us are not there. And that's what really troubles me because we need to be there with our children. We really
And
do.
our
And
children,
um,
um, that's our future. We're here complaining about the immigrants. We're complaining about Donald Trump, which I'm really tired of people talking about him. And we need to be more proactive. We need to stop and look at what we're doing, which is what I
mhm.
like what you are doing with this. You call it Ujamaa, which
Which
is
are my
the
cooperative economics.
cooperative economics. That's one of the Kwanzaa principles.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
and we need that. I mean, that's what our organization is about, cooperative economics. We shouldn't have to have a podcast to beg our people to support our businesses. You
Right.
know,
And if we start, my concept is that now you imagine, because I did go to CPS with this idea and I didn't understand because I was a science teacher, so I did the science fair every year. And I said, why not an entrepreneurs fair every year? I mean, we could teach our children how to set up, but they weren't interested. I understand why now. At first, I was a little naive. I thought they were on the up and up. So I brought that idea. But here's what we can do. In the classroom, we just started. with mock businesses. And I used the science boards. And just like the science display, but on the top it had the name of the business. The students had to do a lot of research into what their business. They had to learn about franchises, sole proprietorships, partnerships. I mean, they had to learn what types of business. I mean, we literally did the background as if it was legit to get their license. And we went on field trips. Like, for instance, if we had so many people that had bakery items, we would go to a bakery and see how cookies and cakes and everything else is made. And we wanted to show them, look, this is possible. And these were fifth and sixth graders when I first started. So they were just in the right age to grasp the concept. So I did it. I mean, I had students when I get to seventh grade, I did commercials. We set up our business. I had a student that made her own lollipop. And so then she had to do a commercial and write a jingle. So, I mean, we did. And you can imagine it was a lot of fun. They were learning a lot. How do I set up a business? How do I run that business? What times, like we had store hours, you had to be there on time to open up your store at 10 o'clock, and you'd work for an hour. So we had a schedule, and the kids would come up from all parts of the school and buy their stuff there, buy their treats. Because the little girl that won the Entrepreneur of the Year that year, her name is Romika Allen. She calls herself Baddie Allen, and she had a franchise, and she had a cousin in the school, so they made their boards identical,
Mm-hmm.
and they had the identical business because they were franchised. And that's the way we taught them about different types of businesses. And when she started, she had an investor, because we read about great entrepreneurs. And we said, well, some of them had parents that invested in their businesses, like John Johnson and the Jet person, and other Black entrepreneurs. They went to their parents, and she went to her parents. They invested in her candy store. I think it was called Candyland, and every day we would open, this girl would have all kind of stuff, pickles and candy. The kids know all the junk, that each other likes. So she would sell that, and at that point, before they got real crazy at CPS, I would just let her own cash. At the end of the day, this person, she could go home with $200. We even would just sell bottled water. We would, if that's your business and you want to sell drinks, 24 cases of water. Most of them have food stamps, so you can make $24. And we started doing the business. We kept records, and it was all. So I had the entrepreneurs workshop, which focused on creating the business and the fun of doing it. It was like a science workshop. And then we had reading biographies, which was biographies of great entrepreneurs that we read about. And then that would be our reading program and our social studies program. And then we had math for business. So we had the kind of math where we taught them how to add up everything, keep records, and all bookkeeping and everything. So this was a really, and here's the thing, because it was ownership, kids work twice as hard, maybe even five times as hard when it's them creating it. Because they would say, this doesn't feel like we're learning because we're having so much fun doing it. But of course, they were learning, and the end of the year, the scores showed up that they
Well,
had
I
mastered
think
this.
whatever experience you have,
Mhm,
wherever that experience is, you're
mhm.
learning something. See,
Yes.
and just like you were learning, you
Mhm.
learn as a parent, as you started
Yeah.
out talking about your sons and your
Mhm.
experiences with them. You're
Right.
always learning.
Mhm.
And I think what
Yeah.
happens with our children, the way they stifle the education in the school, the way they
Mhm.
separated, certain students, and then we end up with a people who don't know how to work together, who won't come
Exactly.
together collectively and put our
Mhm.
dollars together. We won't
Uh-huh.
support each other. When we get in the room, it's like oil and water,
Mm-hmm.
because at that very base of our education, that's not being instilled in us that we need
Mm.
to work collectively. And I think that's what was
Yeah.
so great about what you were doing with these children. And at the same time, I'm sure you instilled in them how important it is for them to work together, and also looking at building and sustaining the communities that we have.
And when you look at that, fast forward, what we did was plant seeds. So now I look at Romika and several other students, and they're business
Mm-hmm.
owners, and they're doing very well because if you plant the seed very young, and I don't have a candy store now, but I have a beauty salon.
Is it in the black community?
Yes, it's in Inglewood.
Okay.
And so here we are. And our dream, my dream, and like we talked about the African Festival of the Arts when they started, I envisioned that a festival for our children like that, where they set up, own, and operate businesses. And that's what the Ujamaa Project is about. Because, I've been fighting the fight for Black teachers for a very long time. And but I never thought I would be doing anything like that. I always thought I would be teaching, educating Black children. And I say, I will teach any child, but I want to teach children what I know. I want to teach children who come from the kind of environment that I came from. I have such an understanding, the pathways to get through that situation, through scholarships, and I've written grants. I love working at our most at risk schools. I've turned down selective enrollment school. I want to go where the need is the greatest. And and if they would let us, CPS just won't let us do what we need to do because we need to be in those environments teaching our children the life skills that they're going to need. Because even though we taught them the standardized stuff, we integrated life skills. So I'm looking at, as a person, this project, I'm looking at the need of the community and its entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
its economics.
Mm-hmm.
I have to teach my children
That's
economics.
right.
I also did character development. I developed a tool called the UMAS, and it was a self monitoring tool. So, what we taught them was how to monitor their behavior, how to change behavior. One of the things we wanted to teach parents was how do I discipline without spanking?
Mm-hmm.
We created a tool for that, a tool that creates bonding and understanding between the parent and the child. We monitor the child's behavior. We teach him. See, because it's all about empowering the child. If I want you to change your behavior, do I come in and beat you? Or do I give you a tool set that you can change your behavior? You realize that you can be empowered and do it. So the You Must was a self monitoring program. And it started with a student that I had because his parents would come to school and they always would come angry. Well, of course, the kid was just all over the place. So whenever anybody called, it was always bad news,
Mm-hmm.
So here comes the parent and they want to knock the kid out. And grandparent then comes up. So I said one day we called the parent, and the parent was so hostile, and they wanted to beat the kid, and the grandmother was worse. So I said, look, this has got to be between the two of us now. We've got to work this out because we got to get you to the next level. What? And because the boy said to me, and it just rang in my spirit when he said, I said, well, can you sit down? Can you, I mean, and he said, I try so hard, Mr. Tonda. I really want to do it. I just don't know how. Can you imagine? The child is self diagnosing,
Mm-hmm.
saying, I don't know what to do about this behavior of mine. I want to act good. And what we have to realize is our children do want to be good. They want to please. So because he simply said that when I was at University of Chicago working on a project, 11 teachers. And I got together with them and we developed the UMass. And the UMass was a self. Every day he would come in, and if he made it through the day, I would give him a sticker. And I would say, "Oh, you made it through the day. You didn't get out your seat. You didn't." Then I made a little office on the side. So I said, whenever you feel like you just gotta get up, go to the
Mhm.
office, sit there. And in the office, I had a lot of little gadgets and things to keep him busy. And then I said, when you feel like you can come back, come back. Well, when he gets to 7 days, I'm like, take this home. Tell your parent to sign it. Now I'm not calling the parent complaining anymore.
Sure,
I got praise
sure.
reports. So now mom's happy. So now he's not getting those beatings at home anymore. And we're adding value to the child. We have to understand that we can add as teachers value to a kid that's having a really hard time just by notifying the parent of all the good things he's doing. Now, after he's made it a whole month, I mean, we gonna act the fool. We gonna really
Okay,
celebrate.
so this
But
is
this
this is part of his education. This is
it
part of
is
what you're
part,
instilling in him, to help manage his own behaviors in life.
right.
If he doesn't, at what point does he get it together? When he becomes an adult, is it supposed to, dramatically change? No.
And this was a kid that sat on the bench. I watched him when I taught seventh grade for 3 years. Nobody would let him in the classroom.
Mhm.
And the principal came in and she was just like, "Oh my
What
God."
happened?
And I said, "What?" And she said, "He's reading." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "He's actually teaching other children how to read." I said, "Yes." So when we lifted that pressure off of him, he began to flourish. He went from 7% to 63% in reading in 1 year. So this is the power of being able to lift the stress off the child. And then, then I laughed because then the final word was, because I had trained him all year. He had this stuff down to a science. And one day I was in getting like upset, and the kids were running all, and I was saying, "You sit down." He does this. And I said, "Malik, what is it?" And he said, "Freeze." That was our code word for when he's getting ready to go off. And then he said, "Freeze, Miss Chatonda." And I was like, "Okay, now you're working the program on
That's
me."
right. Now he's working it on you.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
that's
But look what
yes,
look what he learned. And this is why education is so important. If you look
yes, it
back, after slavery, we went through Reconstruction, went through Jim Crow, and Black people were always pushing education, to learn how to read because they feel like this is going to give you a leg up in life,
is.
But I think just like during the civil rights movement where we were pushing for equal rights, we kind of keep missing the mark about what we're fighting for. What is it that we really want to accomplish here? And what has to be included in that is we have to save our communities.
We
We have to
do.
save our people. So we have to work as a collective. That
And
that
we're
has to
moving,
be drilled in no matter where we go. We have to have that understanding because
and the
that's what's
Ujamaa
wrong
Project,
now, is that we're not working together. And you have been fighting for the Black teachers in the schools. You filed lawsuits, trying to
yes.
help them, keep their
It
jobs. And
is,
right now, you're trying to help some people get their jobs back. Am I correct?
yes, yes. In fact, yesterday I had a court day. And, I was telling somebody, I looked for an attorney, and nobody wanted to take these cases, and they were losing them left and right. And it was just, when they laid us all off, the EEOC called CPS Law Department, and this is what really got me. They said that those teachers, they said, "We don't care what those teachers are talking about." This is what the law department said. "If they don't like it, tell them to go sue us." And they said, and they can't go sue us because we took their jobs, they're broke, they're poor, and they cannot fight back. And hung the phone up. And Miss Watkins said they just hung the phone up and started laughing.
My
And it really
goodness.
bothered me the fact that they felt like that, we could just do anything to you. You're broke, you're poor. And I looked for an attorney, and it was just so much going on. So during the pandemic, we were on the run because when they take your job, Mr. English used to tell me, when they take your job, they're literally trying to kill you. They're taking away your source of life, everything you've worked for. And they really are attacking you from that standpoint. And it was a rough period of time, but because I'm a believer in the Most High, they didn't know that there's so much power in that. And that is why I survived the attack on my family, attack on my life, because I knew. And like, people say things like when you call in, well, Rosita's just doing this because she's mad. My steps are ordered. I understand that to the fullest. Anything that happens to
Well,
me,
you know,
God ordained.
you're doing something
Yeah,
about what
yeah.
happened. I mean, you either
But
do something or you walk away.
yeah, and the thing of it is, I felt that when it happened to me, that's why I formed Cause Teachers. Well, if it happened to me, it's happened to some other people. Where are they? So I started gathering them up. We started meeting at Push. That's how I ran into Karen Lewis then, because I was meeting at Push, organizing Black teachers before I knew CTU. Now, when they saw me doing that, and this is what, see, CTU operates like this. They wanted my shine. They wanted to see what I was doing so they could take it. They wanted it for themselves. So the way that they operate, they even send Brandon around to every meeting that I would go to, and to follow me. He followed me to the cat, and when he saw, but the cat people were loyal to me, he left. And then when I started going on Philip Jackson's show, he followed me to WVON because he didn't know, he's from Elgin. He didn't know anything about Black radio. But Philip would have me on all the time talking about education.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, Philip said, look at this. They had the taste of WVON, and they had bought him a spot on WVON, followed me there. So WVON should be thankful to me because Brandon followed me over there.
Okay.
And then after I left there, we were meeting at Push before we knew him. Next thing I know, they're with Jesse and not us. And they sent emails, and they didn't know that I intercepted them about me, how they were going to break up the relationship between me and Reverend Jackson. Because they said we don't want Rosita and Reverend Jackson to look like they're doing more for teachers than the union is. And
Mm-hmm.
we weren't competing with. I look like a fool trying to compete with a $36 million agency all by myself. We were just doing things to help people, and because their spirit is so wrong, they looked at that as an affront. Like, oh, she's trying to organize a caucus. That was the last thing on my mind.
So what is
All
it?
I
What
did,
is it looking like in the Chicago public schools now for Black teachers?
well, 4,000 of the 19,000 are left. There were 19,000 under Jackie Vine, 14,000 out, and about a little over, and about 4,000 left. So, and it's dropping because now the migrants are coming in and they're going to get those jobs. And we're going to end up, because, they're saying they need bilingual teachers now. So out the door. And I tell Black people, we should be demanding that Spanish is taught to our children, and all teachers need to be bilingual
Mm-hmm.
because it's the only way you're going to get a share of the job. And that's the job market in itself. So we have to make those demands. And we have to make the demand for literacy. I want to get that in because we touched on it a little bit before. Our children do not speak standard English. When Hispanics came here in 1998, they ensured that their children got federal money, state money, and local money funneled in through the ESL and ELL, English learning, English as a second
Mm-hmm.
language, early learners, English learners. And they got funding month for their children. You cannot fail those kids. They can sit in your room for 8 years and they have to get a passing grade, even though they don't understand a word you're saying. Jaquan over here, he's been here, his ancestry for over 400 years. He gets no help. He doesn't get the literacy support he needs because he speaks a second language too called Ebonics, but we don't acknowledge that. So Jaquan gets nothing. He gets no protection. You can fail him 3 times. When he gets to high school, he's 16. Pedro doesn't speak a word of English, but he gets to high school at 13 and he graduates
So,
simply
so
because he cannot
what
fail.
should Black parents be doing?
We should be, and I've started a movement. It's on change.org, literacy for Black children, and why it's important to demand our legislators to add Black children to the ESLELL bill.
Mm-hmm.
It's legislation. All we have to do is get a legislator to believe what I'm saying is true and give Jaquan and Shaniqua the same language or support that the immigrant children get through our tax dollars. That's all they have to do. It's just that simple. Include them because in 1996, Ebonics was declared a second language, and therefore our children should have always gotten the additional literacy support, and they
Well,
have.
let me also get your opinion because I hear more parents are starting to homeschool. Some people are talking about they and are setting up some independent schools, um, and kind of moving away from the public education because a lot of people are not happy with the learning of their children. They're not happy with the values that are being taught. So, give me your perspective on that.
Well,
That's going to be our closing.
I'm a product of a mother who felt the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't go to public school. And I asked my mother, "Why are you spending all this money? I want some new shoes." And she just was deft on education. So I think it's the right thing to do. If they're not, look, you only have a few years with your child to get this education. If you make it, if it goes wrong, that's a lifetime you got to deal with. Make your decision, provide your child the best quality education. I take it very seriously because I know that when a child gets a quality education, no matter how poor they are, whatever they look like, they can navigate out of poverty. And if they don't, they will not. That's what we know. They will not navigate out of poverty unless they have a quality education. Or if they do, it's doing some criminal act.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way they're going to get out of the mess.
And then I
So
think
we
there's
don't want
also that opportunity to instill that concept of collective work and responsibility.
we need our we most of all we need our own education system. But if we can't, until we get that, or if we never get that, parents wake up. You got to be involved. Those years that you're putting in where you bond with your kid. I used to tell people I didn't go out. I disappeared for like 15 years. People didn't see me. They're like, "Did you move to another state?" No, I got 4 kids. That's who I spend my time with. I had time to party. I spend my time with my children. Do that, parents. When you invest, you will not be going to the graveyards for some nonsense, the prisons. Your children will be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And we're not saying that everybody has to be a doctor, lawyer, or
That's
PhD,
right.
but everybody can have a quality education, a quality life if we give them the proper education.
Yep. And that's including education, that's including values,
And
including, as
that's
you say,
all
learning how to manage behaviors. There's a lot
the
that's
behavior.
involved there that's
Mhm.
important.
and the values, our values are not being passed on. This is why we're having the problem we're
That's
having.
right.
The things that I know, everything I'm telling you right now was passed on generationally by my grandparents, by their, it was passed on to me. We're not able to do that because Betsy and everybody else is infusing our children with their
That's
ideology.
right.
They're telling them about how to be transgender and transsexual and this and abortion and this and that. None of those things are traditional things that we learn. So we're black people being infused by a ideology that's foreign to us. It's like if you put anything foreign in your body, there's going to be a problem. Your body is going to reject it. Your mind is going to reject. It's not going to work out for you. And these things that were crafted over 400 years of our people passing down knowledge for us to survive white supremacy. That's why we're all alive, because our ancestors provided a pathway through our behavior that we could survive in this country and we could flourish and survive white supremacy. And what are we doing now? Our children are not flourishing because we've abandoned our best
And if
practices
our
for everything.
children and if our children don't flourish, then we will perish as a people. So the education of our children is very important. The work that you're doing, the entrepreneurial work that you're doing is very important. Continuing to fight for our teachers is very important. And we just this is what we have to focus on.
And look forward to my books. I have two books that I'm trying to get published by Christmas. I've been writing them for a long time.
Okay.
One is on Chicago style organizing. It's called In the Year of 911 at Rainbow's End. And that's is I named it a Rainbow Inn in honor of one of my students that was killed when they were uh, closing our school, Rita Haskins. And the other book is the history of Black educators from 1600 to today,
Oh.
and it shows you that even in 1600, Black ed people who were here were educating their children. They had schools and stuff, believe it or not, way back then. So I went when I was writing the first book, I tried to do a little history. The history turned out to be 500 pages. So then I had to separate and say, okay, this is a book on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It's a history book. And so now we're going to do the more modern book, which is about everything you want to know about education organizing at CPS, CTU, and why things have fallen and happened like it has.
Those sound
That's a
like two very interesting and necessary reads. So you make sure you let us know when they're out. Um, Hopefully, they will also be available in some of our Black bookstores.
definitely
Okay, absolutely.
because I don't think there's a history book about Black education and Black
Hmm.
educators. I don't. And so I'm looking up because I've had to finish my doctorate and a lawsuit. I'm just like,
Okay.
and doing all this other stuff. But I just thank God for the opportunity and
Hmm.
the time to get it done. I'm so grateful that I have this time,
And
and
the willingness to do it. It's a lot of work, you know.
it is
It's a
a
lot of
lot of
work,
work.
but it's a
But
work
it,
of passion. It's a work of necessity, and we definitely appreciate what you're doing.
well, we're trying to leave that historical record.
Okay.
We're trying to leave it the history, the blueprint, for our people, so that we won't go down this path.
Right.
This is the second time in history that they fired all the Black teachers. One in 1954 after Brown versus the Board of Education. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
So we need to show people all the tricks and the trades of how they did it.
And this is proactive, and that's what's
Yeah.
important. Like I said, when we first started, there's a lot of complaining about what Johnny and what Mary is getting over here, but this is about, hey, let's stop and let's be proactive.
And we're hoping some people will join us on and help us to set up the. So if you know anybody that does like the African Arts Festival, we need to start meeting. I would love to see that happen for our children next
So
year.
how can people contact you, Rosita?
Okay, you can contact me through causteachers at Gmail. You can also contact me on Facebook under Cause Teachers. I have a Facebook group and a Facebook page there. I had a website, but it's down right now. But you can contact me through those things. I can give you my phone numbers. It's 773-419-7417 or 773-580-7183.
Okay.
Okay, and this is recorded so you can play it back. So those, and you can reach me through my email. And so, thinking of any other way, but that is how you can contact me. And I would love people. Let's do this. Let's do this to change the future. Can you imagine? I had this vision of our children owning all the stores up and down 79, 75th Street. If we begin to plant those, that is
That's
possible.
right.
That is
That's
possible.
right.
We can take our community back, starting one child at a time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Rosita, for the work that you're doing. Thank you for coming tonight. People, please check out Rosita at her website and her numbers. If you're interested in doing some of this work, she's a wealth of information and definitely willing to support you and help you out. So I want to thank you for coming tonight. You can watch this podcast rather. It'll be archived on our website for those who came in late or want to watch it at another time. It'll be on our website. And we ask you to
Wonderful.
go to rrgbc.org where you can make a donation to help us with our cause. We also have an online store where you could purchase um, some of the profits from that is used to help our cause. We're not in this for profit. We're in this to help our communities. We're trying to save our Black communities here at Repair, Restore, and Grow Black communities. So I want to thank you for coming tonight. And Rosita, you have a good evening.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay.